I'm going to call to order the City of Burlington Board of Finance on Monday, December 16th at 4:33 p.m. I'd like to start first with the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda?
Move to adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any discussion on the matter before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to item number 2, which is our public forum. It is our practice to go first to folks in the room. If there's anyone from the public who would like to address the Board of Finance, and then we'll go online. So I'll first start by seeing if anyone is here from the public who would like to address the Board of Finance. Seeing none, we'll go online and see if anyone is online. And I see former City Councilor Sharon Busher online. Sharon, I think you're our only one tonight, so we'll go ahead and promote you and welcome.
Why, thank you. I'm going to be quiet tonight. I'm going to listen as opposed to speak. So thank you for recognizing me, and I look forward to the budget discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I always just want to give you the opportunity. Excellent. All right, so we'll move on then. I will close public forum and move on to item number 3. Item number 3 is our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
You go ahead.
I so move. Moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers. And before we take a vote, I wanted to just pause and go to our city attorney on item 3.2, because this was a conversation related to the REID Empowerment Fund awardees. We did a little legwork in this last week, and Attorney Brown will give a brief update on where we landed.
Sure. So it was flagged, and I want to thank a couple of counselors, in particular, Councilor Shannon, who's not on this committee, but then also Councilor Barlow, as part of Board of Finance, flagged a concern that in the past, when the city has tried to give grant funding directly to the Burlington School District, the city has been told by the state that that's not permissible. And in fact, there is a statute that I referenced in a memo that I provided for the Board of Finance that prohibits a municipality other than the school district directly or indirectly providing funds for education expenses. So last week, when the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging was presenting their grant awardees, one of the awardees was the Burlington School District, and the Board of Finance raised concerns about that. And then another awardee was the Islamic Society of Vermont. Again, in the memo that I provided to the Board of Finance, I provided some legal analysis to support indicates that it is constitutionally permissible for the city to make this grant to the Islamic Society of Vermont. And if anyone has questions, I can certainly get more granular, but I do explain this in the memo. So my advice to REIB was that they should withdraw their motion as to approving an empowerment fund grant for the Burlington School District, but that they could move forward with their motion to have the Board of Finance approve the grant to the Islamic Society of Vermont. If you have a question,
Is there any further discussion on this item or anything related to the consent agenda? Or we go to a vote? Okay, seeing none, this is the vote on the consent agenda. So all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, City Attorney. Appreciate that. Crossing our T's and dotting our I's. All right, moving on to our deliberative agenda. We're going to go to item 4.1, which is related to fiscal year 25, our current fiscal year budget, the actual review as of at least October 31st. We're going to be joined by Brad Kuchenberger, our Director of Finance from the Clerk Treasurer's Office, and probably our CAO, to do a bit of a deeper dive. This was something we tabled to this meeting in order to provide adequate time and to put it in front of the agenda. So Brad, welcome.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Mayor. Thanks for having me. We are here to talk about the budget to actuals update. And I think, Catherine, you were planning on giving a bit of an intro, or at least last week when we had this planned out.
Yes.
If that has changed, I'm happy to just take it away.
No, I will just give a quick intro to say, this is part of our new and improved practice over this fiscal year. As a part of our consent agenda, we have been providing these monthly updates about where we are according to our budget. But we have been relatively early in the fiscal year, and while you may have had questions, we might not have had answers because we haven't had as much data yet. And now that we have more than a quarter's worth of data, it seems like a good time to be able to dig into what some of our assumptions were and to be able to allow you to ask questions, especially in light of some of the changes we made to gross receipts. You'll see that we focus on them, as well as a department by department review of our big city departments. So I don't want to take too much time. Go for it, Brad.
Catherine, so we're going to review, we've switched it from a written memo to more of a presentation format for that purpose. And we are going to be looking at information that is through October 31st, which is 1/3 of the way through our fiscal year. We're going to first take a look at everything in total, look at our revenues and then our expenditures, and wrap up with some conclusions and recommendations. So at first, on page 2 or 3, depending on the title slide, there's the chart that we've been providing on a monthly basis at the tail end of fiscal year 24 and through to this point, fiscal 25. And it breaks out revenues and expenditures in some groupings that are more easily digestible on one page. The columns across are what is showing our amended budget to date, what we've spent to date, and the percentage of the budget that we've spent. So this is just a reminder that we're 33% of the way through our fiscal year when you're looking at some of these percentage line items. On the right-hand side of the page, we have some assumptions that we apply to each of these categories, and we've kept those assumptions regular since we developed them, so that we can at least have some consistency when we're looking month to month and not be continuously changing assumptions. And we use those to come up with both a projected revenue and a projected expense total. So if you look at the last line or the bottom of the page, as of October 31st, with our projection formulas, we've come up with a small deficit, or basically a close to zero position projected for fiscal year 25. So a negative of $90,000, which is 0.1%. So that is, at this point through the fiscal year, pretty good, and we'll be able to refine these figures as we move along. We wanted to present to you the big 5 revenues, which comprise the majority of general fund revenues in the city, the largest being property taxes. And property taxes is the largest, and it's also the most historically consistent and pretty much easiest to project, given that we collect approximately 99%, almost 100% of our funds in any given year. The next largest bucket is our pilot fee for service and development fees. So we took a look at our collections to date for each of those categories, and also took into consideration some of the conversations we've had and things we know and how things are gonna shake out. And we'll be near 100%, maybe a touch below, but we'll be close to collecting all of those fees, which is typical for a year. I'm gonna jump past gross receipts because we're gonna take a deeper dive into that and on the following slide. But to wrap up the others, we have our local option tax, which is a 1% added to the sales, meals, rooms, and alcoholic beverages tax. It's collected by the state. A month or two after a quarter ends, the state then sends us an amount. And if we look at our first quarter payment, which we received in August, we haven't yet received our second quarter payment. But if we prorate that out, we expect to be coming under slightly but close to our budgeted revenue. And the same is true for our franchise fees, which is the payment for services and utilities of the use of the streets and things of that nature. But the most interesting story to tell right now is related to gross receipts. So if you recall, in our FY25 budget, we increased the rooms portion of the gross receipts tax from 2% to 4%. We increased the meals and alcohol related portion by 0.5%, so from 2 to 2.5%. So through October 31st, our revenues for gross receipts are on track to outpace FY24 by $1.3 million. However, with the rate increase that we applied to those portions, we would expect a further, more distance between FY24 and FY25. And so from a budget to actuals basis, we're actually looking to be under budget about $1.2 million if all trends continue. So we looked into some of the details, which is on slide 6. And we have a story to tell in 3 charts. And so each of those 3 charts are close replicas of each other in that you have the sales type, you have the fiscal year, a nominal change, and a percent change. And the first kind of indicator we have is the number of gross receipts submissions. So gross receipts are paid from those businesses and others who need to submit gross receipts, but they send it to the city, and we don't have necessarily recourse to go after them. And as we've shown on the chart here, our data shows we have 127 or 12.3% less submissions in the same time period in FY25 as FY24. And so the obvious question is why we don't have a great full fleshed out answer. It's some combination of it could be a bit of non-compliance. It could be a bit of closed or changing businesses. We are analyzing that now, but this is also a time that I'd like to pitch, which has come up in other discussions we've had, a need for a nominal business registration, which could help in the administration of gross receipts and many other city functions, including planning. I think there's a lot of administrative benefits to a business registration outside of just revenue collection, but this, when we're looking into why a certain phenomenon or why a certain data point is happening, we just lack the information to really dig into it. So that is one pitch there. So we know we're receiving less submissions in 25 than we did during the same time period in 24. We then looked at the gross sales figures that were provided in those submissions during the first third of 25 and compared them to 24. And we can see that 7.5 million less dollars of gross sales has occurred in 25 to 24, you know, notwithstanding any other of those reasons that we haven't yet explained. But the result of the tax increases on rooms and meals on the final chart at the bottom of the page will show that our city revenues have increased by $240,000, despite our gross sales figures decreasing. And so we then ask the question, is this only happening in Burlington? Because some of these figures are pretty large and out of the norm. The Vermont Tax Department publishes sales and use tax data and breaks it out by town and by county. The most up-to-date figures are through the second quarter of 2024, but they indicate a trend that had begun, I think, at least a quarter or two prior to that, which is most Vermont counties, on the left-hand side is counties, on the right-hand side are some comparable towns within Chittenden County. Most counties, despite, you know, Windsor and Rutland and maybe another one in Orange County, have all seen sizable decreases in their sales and use tax receipts, 5.1% for Chittenden County. And similarly, if you look at on the right-hand side to the comparable towns or, you know, some of the similar geographic and population areas, you're seeing a similar trend. And so what this really seems to be saying is, for whatever reason, there are, you know, large economic factors that Burlington is subject to. And a portion of that means less retail business, less meals and rooms business, less of all of those business types that generate our gross receipts tax. So that is something that we'll have to keep a close eye on as we approach the winter months and have to start making some decisions about where we're going to land with FY25. We turn away from revenues to expenditures. Our expenditures are tracking historically predictably through the first third of the fiscal year. We are showing us a snippet of the largest 4 general fund departments: fire, police, public works, and parks and recreation. Spending in police and fire are pretty much right on target. Public works had a sizable amount of vacancies to begin the year, which is showing that they've only expended 24% of their budget, but most of that can be accounted for with the vacancies they experienced at the beginning of the year. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Parks and Recreation is fully staffed and has been prior to the start of fiscal 25, and various increases to salaries through reclass, et cetera, or just some nominal things have them slightly ahead of target at 36% spent to date, compared through October 31st. Citywide, our projections for personnel costs are projected to be below budget by $4.5 million. And a vast majority of this projected saving stems from a 14% vacancy rate of our sworn officers in the police department. And then the remainder accounts for what we would consider to be kind of typical turnover, churn, attrition across the other general fund departments within the city. At this point in the fiscal year, we assume that we're going to spend 100% of our budget in our other expenditure categories, our non-personnel expenditure categories, like capital equipment, operating regional programs, those sorts of things. But as we get into, I would say, the end of January, early February, we'll be able to start dialing in those figures and give you some more specific detail. But the conservative, safe approach right now is to assume that all of those costs will be 100% expended till further notice. On the final page, we have just a brief overview. We have 33% of the year done. Excuse me, revenues and expenditures are both projecting to be about $4.5 million below the FY25 budget. Looking back at our historical actuals, that is very typical for our city. We always seem to be below our budgeted figures in both expenditures and revenues, and end the year with both of them about equal, but both of them below budget in about this amount. So far, so good with our FY25 budget. I wanted to identify a couple of risks and some maybe potential upsides as we come into, around the corner of January, which is, gross receipts, which we talked about. If our gross sales figures post October 31st continue the same trend that we saw prior to that, we're going to need to adjust our budget downward for our revenues with a mitigating expenditure decrease as well. I also wanted to point out there's some risk involved in our intra-city transfers budget, which often lags a little bit behind our budgeted projections. And in such a tight year, that is something that we want to keep a close eye on. So for an example, $2 million of our intra-city transfers revenue comes from public works project billing. So as a project has expenditures that are paid for out of the city general fund, we seek reimbursement either through, let's say, the state or another federal grant or something of that nature, and they pay us back. What we've been seeing is some of those reimbursements are either been slow or we haven't been able to generate the amount of billing that would be eligible that we budgeted. So that's another area that we want to take a look at. And then the upside is, we had a great holiday season. People are buying, people are staying through the winter months and spending money in our city, which would, sort of normalize our gross receipts figures and give us less of a hurdle to climb and not looking at leaving us 1.2 short in that category. So I'm recommending that we don't make any changes at this point in time, but identified some of the areas that we're going to be looking at closely and investigating further, and will be probably in addition to our work on the FY26 budget, we'll be preparing some just in case menu of options of what we need to do in FY25 should we have to change things around. I want to iterate that it is very important for the city to hit a positive operating revenue for fiscal 25. And that is for the simple fact that our unassigned fund balance needs to grow at the same rate or faster than our expenditures overall grow. And so as our expenditures grow, our fund balance, our unassigned fund balance needs to grow, and that requires surplus. So we'll be, watching that very, very closely and making sure we hit those marks and bring you recommendations of the sort. And I think before we do a little Q&A or open it for any other discussion, I think the mayor wanted to do a wrap up, or at least that's what we talked about before. If not, that's okay.
Those are the before times, Brad.
Those are the,
Yeah.
that was the weekend.
We had those thoughts in my brain last Monday. First of all, thank you. Very thorough as always. I really appreciate the attention to detail as we try to make sure we are being transparent with folks, especially the Board of Finance, and how things are tracking. I just want to emphasize, because gross receipts was a policy decision and we wanted to really track that closely, that we are going to do our due diligence to really get at the evidence, the realness behind that data to make sure we're making sure compliance is actually happening across the board, that we just know where there might be other larger factors that are not just Burlington impacted. This time of year, I was talking about Catherine around this as a legislator, and it's available to the public. Go watch it. Tom Gavette, who is the state economist for the whole state of Vermont, does a briefing to Vermont legislators, and often this time of year talks around the larger trends of our economy, how it's impacting the state of Vermont's revenues, and puts it into a larger context. He often talked about how we're a flea on the tail of a dog in terms of the overall economy. So I offer that, Lawrence, just to take this always in a larger context outside of the Burlington bubble around other factors that are going to be impacting our little city, and just putting that piece of information also in front of them. So I think given what time it is, let's open it up for
Sure.
questions folks have. I'll keep track of time. We probably have a few minutes to kind of dig a little deeper. Senator, you want to upgrade Senator Carpenter? Councilor Carpenter.
Just curious, given the holiday season, how quickly after, say, January 1, would we get updated information on particular activity in November and December, presuming that's one of our bigger months? And I presume we would get it both on live activity here, but for instance, do we get a portion of the sales tax that comes through the internet as well? Is that?
So, yes, and so the gross receipts, which is the 2.5% on meals and rooms, and the other 4% on hotels. That all comes in, it is due 30 days after the close of the month. So October's gross receipts were due November 30th, and usually by about December 10th, like we should have we have October's by November, and now we'll have November's will be now.
Right.
Yeah, so you got it. So it's a pretty big lag.
Okay.
It is not as large as the lag that you are talking about with the local option tax. And that is that tax is controlled and received by the state, and that only comes to us quarterly. So that one really is a much bigger lag than the monthly that we get every.
So for the second fiscal quarter, which would include November and December, we would not know that till the beginning of April,
Yes.
even on the back of the envelope, but they don't have any.
That would be a good question for Cara, so I can follow up
Yeah.
with her. Yeah, we mostly track when we get the money,
Yeah,
but there are some reports that come out, so it might be possible to get something a little sooner. I'll follow up.
my other question, was just related to Brad's comment about the business registry, which I'd be supportive of, but how useful or unuseful is the state's business registry? That's not something that would assist us.
It can help us when we already know that a business is in Burlington, because then if they have updated contact information, we can get it from there. But part of what we are experiencing here, like with the 127, I think it is, fewer returns that we've received, that does not mean there's 127 fewer businesses. Each business files a separate return, like one for alcohol, one for meals, one for admissions. So it could be that a business stopped, it went out of business, then they're not gonna give us any of those. Or they just stopped selling alcohol, so they're gonna give us one fewer return. But having our own business registry helps us, number one, knowing that a business came to Burlington, and to avoid the problem of, unless it's right up and down this stretch, or they've otherwise gotten in touch with Kara's department, my office doesn't always know to get them set up on gross receipts. So sometimes a business has been in operation for 3, 4, 8, 9 months and has never realized they should be
But we
collecting.
would not
the
know that from the
2%.
state.
The state does not give us that information now.
We can't ask them for every business in registered Burlington.
We have, it is my understanding that is not going well. But coincidentally, tomorrow, I've got a meeting with Kara and the person in CT who are coordinating on this, so I will double check.
I will also insert as a former member of House Commerce, until probably this year, there was some pretty antiquated, like this is the name of the state, antiquated database systems supporting that. It was very hard to pull data out of state business registry program. I'm hoping there's an update because that was certainly enabled under legislation not too long ago. So help is on the way for making sure that there is better, well, the state itself can issue better reports and whatnot. So hopefully that can come and flow a little bit better, but that might be literal breaking news that more information is able to be. And that includes actually also tracking even deeper into the details of who owns businesses, for example, as well. But there was a whole new platform that the current Secretary of State was transitioning that system over to in the last year-ish or so. Okay. Any other questions for Brad or Catherine? Councilor King?
Thanks, appreciate the presentation. One thing that I don't think was in there that I'm wondering about is city spending on homelessness. So I think there was an estimate that was circulated a month or two ago that we're spending something like $8 million a year. And I'm wondering if we have a sense of how that is spread throughout the year. My concern being that, like, you know, if it's concentrated towards the summer, maybe like in the last quarter of the fiscal year, you know, all of a sudden we're short.
I don't know that figure off the top of my head, but that's an interesting question. I'll do some research to get back to you.
Just, you know, Brad, Sarah Russell was really gathering that from all departments, and it was a calendar year to date, not fiscal year, so there's a little crisscross overlap. But we were tracking as much as that as we could. Any other questions or comments from the board? Serious beat going on, so
Yeah.
helping us move through this agenda.
Thank you.
So much vibrancy for this. So thank you, Brad. Okay, move right along. On to item 4.2, which is with CEDO. Brian, if you want to come up, this is a resolution which will be related to a grant that we were. Yes, grant. I was like, where's the grant word? Okay. Authorization to accept the U.S. Department of Transportation Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant of $1 million for the South End Coordinated Redevelopment. So Brian, you want to take it away?
Sure, I'll give a very good, quick Cliff Notes version. This is essentially funding for the city to primarily pay for subject matter experts who can do financial modeling, can do design work, can develop a financing strategy for the very expensive public improvements that will be needed to make the South End development viable. We're very fortunate to be funded. It's a very competitive process, and looking forward to signing this before January 20th.
Echo going on. Is that us or?
There's a microphone. Yes. Yes.
Could we send someone upstairs?
So if there's someone upstairs in Contoy's auditorium who can hear us down here, we can hear you, and they just.
Thank you, thank you very much. You've been around for a minute there.
You're on mute
Thank
now.
you. Okay, we have taken over. Okay, thank you. Okay. And again, any other discussion or questions on item 4.2 or questions for Brian?
I just, Mayor, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to bring it up, but my understanding is that the pre-development agreement, which is somewhat associated with this grant, that the administration and our C-Corp partners are seeking more time with respect to that. My understanding perhaps is that the administration will be signing off on an extension to that agreement. And if you could just explain the extent to which the acceptance of this grant money and its availability perhaps plays into some aspects as to why that agreement needs more time, and if that will be coming back to the council, my understanding is no, because it is a pre-development agreement. But if you could give us some sense as to when the council may hear next with respect to the South End Seaport development. And didn't ask this question beforehand. I wouldn't anticipate you to necessarily have the answers now, but I think it would be helpful for us to know.
Sure. I'll kick this over to Brian and simply say we will come back for generally an update soon to the council on the whole project in general, but you're correct, Councilor Travis, we are just doing a small section on the pre-development agreement, and we determined that it is something that the mayor can have the sole authority to extend it with, of course, the consent of the other party. Do you want to answer a little bit more?
Sure, we will be coming back, I would anticipate at one of the January meetings to begin the discussion with the council in earnest regarding basically revising. We're not really quite ready for a development agreement because there's a lot of work that still needs to happen, but we've moved quite a bit further than we were last March when the council approved a pre-development agreement. So we're essentially bringing you a new and improved pre-development agreement before we come back for a final development agreement. And there will be milestones and commitments for reimbursement. So this grant does relate because some of the work that needs to be done will be supported by the grant, and the development team will also, the developers themselves will be making contributions to some of the costs that are necessary for determining feasibility.
Okay. And it is our agreement that the development agreement itself would need to come back to the council for its approval at that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else on this transportation grant? Seeing none. Brian, this is a motion related for the resolution to advance. I don't actually see. Yep. So there is a short recommended motion here. So I would like to make a motion. Okay.
But it might be in the memo.
In the resolution.
You can also say, I'll even make an exception, Civic Clerk. It says to recommend that the city council approve the attached resolution.
Yes, I move to recommend that the city council approve the attached resolution.
Great, thank you, Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion on item 4.2? See none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, we're gonna move on to item 4.3. Item 4.3 is with our Burlington Parks Recreation Waterfront Department. Cindy, come on up. Reclassification of one position, recreation assistant in the Department of Parks, Recreation and Waterfront. Cindy, welcome. It's a little overdue.
I just want to welcome Kirsten Santos, our recreation manager, is also joining us. Gary, our superintendent, his son's first high school basketball game is today, so he's up and you guys will be here. So we had a retirement at the end of June, our recreation specialist, and we kept that position open until actually today. Natalie started today, her first day. And during the past 5.5 months, the recreation assistant provided hours as the lead, and also with recreation assistant hours with our recreation manager, Kirsten, stepping in with the higher level work. It allowed us to see how much more capacity we could be doing for adult programming if that recreation specialist did not have to be on site during those 10 to 2 hours, and allowed us to see that capacity of that recreation assistant individual. Many of you may have met Lulu in her other role as far as Lulu's amazing catering work that she does. But we're also fortunate to have Lulu work for the city. So general, cutting to the chase on it is that we see being elevating the position from a grade 9 to a grade 12 that could do more higher capacity work on site at the center, will allow our recreation specialist, who's a grade 15, to be doing more budget working, creating more programs. And as a sort of ever growing adult population here in Burlington, we think that that's really important be able to put a bit more focus on our adult programs. Kirsten, is there anything that you'd add to that?
No, I think that sums it up.
Thank you. Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, nice and easy. I like that. All right, are we ready for a motion? Okay, Counselor Sharps.
To approve and recommend the city council approve and authorize the reclassification of the recreation assistant, a regular part-time, non-exempt AFSCME grade 9 position to a regular part-time, non-exempt AFSCME grade 12 position in the Department of Parks, Recreation and Parks.
Thank you, Counselor Chavez. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Kane. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving right along.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Moving on
Thank
to
you.
0.4, with our Burlington Police Department, it's a reclassification request for the records clerk position, and we have Shannon Trammell here, our executive manager at the police department. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am, council. We are here seeking a reclassification for our records clerks positions. There's currently 4 of them. For many, many years, that position has not been reclassified. Maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago or so, when we had to implement the online incident reporting system, the records team really took on a lot of additional work to process those. So initially that team processes those reports, make sure all of the information is entered and correct, and enters it into our Valcor system, and then turns it over to the sergeants to, pursue. In addition to that, they've also been several other functions added to their job description, and those are in the memo. I'll just briefly state that they compile and process all of the cases for court, meeting those deadlines, whether that's affidavits or criminal histories. So they really prepare all of the court packets. They process status emails from the state's attorney's office, and more recently are taking on what used to be the protection orders, which used to, I believe it was Shelburne PD used to take care of all of them in the county. That has since changed, and then the state is requiring individual police departments to enter their own protection orders. So during the day, when those protection orders come in, the records clerks review them, they enter them, they track them and put them out to be served. And as such, we are requesting a reclassification for them from a 13 to a 15. The impact to the budget for us, there is some vacancy savings from a records clerk that served with us for 49 years. She just retired. And from her step placement to some of the newer records clerks that have joined us, there's savings to be had from that salary difference. And for this year, that's where that difference will come from.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Any questions for Shannon or comments?
I'm curious, how many protection orders do we get?
I start to see that, so I am included in that group as well and start to see them. There may be 3 or 4 a day that are coming in currently right now that I've seen. Sometimes I think it's more busier than others. But off of the top of my head, I think that's what I've seen on a daily basis so far, that come in, and during the daytime hours, the records clerks will take care of those, and after their shift is ended and when they go home, the dispatch team is required to put those in. And that has been practiced before, so dispatch was entering those during off hours for our police department. During daytime hours, now the records clerks are responsible for entering those.
Any other questions and comments? Seeing none, are we ready for a motion? Counselor Travers?
Move to approve and recommend city council approve and authorize the reclassification of the 4 records clerk positions, regular full-time, non-exempt AFSCME grade 13 positions to regular full-time, non-exempt AFSCME grade 15 positions within BPD.
Counselor Travers, is there a second? Carpenter, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Shannon.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Then on to our last item for the deliberative agenda, item 4.5, which is a water resources personnel reorganization, impacting various positions. And we have DPW Director Jamie Spencer and Division Director Eric. Welcome. Probably the HR team that just wanted to come and watch this. I think the finance, lots of personnel matters. Go HR. Sorry, I didn't recognize you before back there. So.
They are a great resource. Jason Spencer, Director of Public Works, thanks for having us tonight. What you see in front of you is a comprehensive step here in water resources sustainability. Matching similar structures to other utilities, similar to BED and others. There's 4 reclasses and 1 new FTE here. All were budgeted in FY25. And I'm going to turn it over to Megan Moyer to give the detail.
Thanks, Chapin. Those of you who may recall, though I feels like a long time ago during the FY25 budget presentations, a lot of our slides went into the need for this additional layer of operational management. And so this is finally bringing it to fruition. I would add that in addition to it being in the FY25 approved budget, we are going to have a retirement soon at the end of 25, which would essentially make it net neutral, the creation of the 1 position. And functionally, you know, my wastewater facilities manager, Matt Dowell, my waste drinking water facilities manager, Steve Aslin, and then previously the senior customer care associate. They're so busy just keeping the day-to-day running that we get stuck in staying on the hamster wheel. And so without adding some additional capacity so that the director can participate more fully in continuous improvement and getting us off the hamster wheel, from my perspective in the hamster wheel that I've been on, it will just continue. So. Is there any questions?
Any questions or discussion before? Quite a bunch tonight. Okay.
They're saving themselves.
I know, we're on pace.
It's a marathon tonight.
I know, it's all right. And we're having like an easy jog to start. Okay. Well, it is a long motion on this one. So I would be happy for anyone to make a motion and just reference to the clerk. So would anyone like to do a really easy motion over there? Counselor Travers.
I move to recommend that the city council approve the reclassification of the positions as set forth on civic clerk and to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the CAO to approve budget neutral amendments to the FY25 wastewater and stormwater budgets to move budgeted amounts, salaries and wages, total compensation, contingency, well, let's not do that, to the appropriate personnel and benefits expense lines as needed to implement this action.
Good job. So Travers. There's a lot of numbers in that. Thing. Is there a second on Counselor Travers' motion? Counselor Carpenter, thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, DPW team.
Thank you. We'll see you upstairs.
All right, and then seeing no other business, I'm going to adjourn the Board of Finance at 5:22 p.m. Thank you very much.